Welcome to Tampa Home Talk with your host, native Tampa real estate girl, Katrina Madewell, a full-time, passionate, out-of-the-box thinker, love for home ownership kind of realtor with over 21 years of combined mortgage and real estate experience. Tune in every week at this time for expert advice on everything you need to know about home ownership, finance, maintaining great credit, building wealth, and making your everyday life better, and how you can be financially successful today and tomorrow. Remember, love where you live or let Katrina fix it. Now, here's your host of Tampa Home Talk, Katrina Madewell.
Good afternoon. This is your host, Katrina Madewell of Charles Rodenberg Realty. You're listening to Tampa Home Talk on the Real Estate Radio Network. Thank you so much for chiming in today for our show. You can catch us here every Thursday and Saturday at 5 p.m. And we're also across the web on Facebook and Twitter at Tampa Home Talk. We'll be here to answer your real estate related questions. Very proud to have our special guest and show partners featured on today's show with SEC Inspection Services. I have Melissa Rodgers. And Dan, you're going to have to help me with his last name.
Menikheim.
Thank you. You guys have a very interesting history, and I think it's one that sometimes we don't often see from home inspectors in the industry. And it was interesting because I loved talking to you the other day, and that you have a general construction background, which I thought was awesome.
Yeah.
So when did you guys get started with SEC? Like, how old is your company?
Our company is now 10 years old technically, but we've been in the business 14 years.
And have you guys done inspections the whole time?
Yes.
So, and then at what point did you say, hey, I'm going to get my general contractor's license and add this to the mix? Or was it just general knowledge? Like, how did that come about?
Yeah, a little bit of both. We both had a background in construction with our families and our fathers. And at some point, I really became interested in more than just helping support, the customer service end of it and the scheduling end of it, and really wanted to know more about the business. So I actually went and studied and took my general contractor's license back in 2004. And if anybody out there that knows about construction knows that is intense.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah.
I've heard it's a very, very tough exam.
It is. Yes.
How much education is required in advance of that?
There's different requirements as far as his experience. So that's, you have to have at least 4 years experience. And as far as the studying part of it, it's all kind of at your own pace. So I studied off and on for, probably almost a year to go through that. And there's local training programs that you can go through and study guides that you can go through.
So did you pass the first time?
I did not. There's 4 parts.
Okay.
And so you have to pass all 4 parts. And
so at the same time?
Yes. Yeah. The first part is like business and finance and laws. And that it's 2 parts, but it's like 1 score.
Gotcha.
It's kind of strange how they do it, and they might have even changed it by now. But yeah, so I passed the first day, but not the second day, and then went back, and then I think I did it actually in 3 parts. So it was not easy.
I've heard that from several people that have taken it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about who SEC is and like what makes you guys a little different, say, than the average home inspection company. Because I know we work with you and we've had a great experience and not so great sometimes with other inspectors, but the experience has always been second to none with you guys.
Well, I really appreciate that. Everything is based on customer service and being the center of everything. We're in the middle of maybe 2 realtors, because you've got the buyer's agent, seller's agent. Sometimes the buyer and the seller are present. There's other people in the transaction, title company, insurance company, mortgage brokers. There's so many people involved in the transaction. So we pride ourselves on being the heart of everything and really being on a team with everybody, whether we know those people that are involved or not. We know what it's taking to get their job done and what it takes to make the transaction move smoothly. So, we're doing a thorough inspection, and we're doing the same type of inspection no matter who's hiring us. But we know that sometimes it takes a little bit extra in certain areas to make sure that transaction goes through. So sometimes that looks like, we have to go back to the property for something to detail something out a little bit more because the insurance carrier is requiring that in order for them to get insurance to have the transaction go through.
The 4-point and the wind mitigations, we're going to get into that a little later in the show.
Yeah, and then sometimes the buyer wants to know that something was fixed after we did the inspection. So, that entails going back out sometimes and documenting that. So just going above and beyond and making sure that everyone is taken care of during that transaction is really something that sets us apart. And that's why we have built so many relationships over the years with our referral partners, whether it's realtors or insurance agents or buyers and sellers that use us for multiple properties. So.
Right. We certainly have to agree. You're listening to Tampa Home Talk, and this is your host, Katrina Madewell, with Charles Rutenberg Realty. I have in studio today SEC Inspections, Melissa Rodgers and Dan
Menikheim.
I'm going to get his last name right yet. So let's talk about exactly what a full inspection is and what are some of the components that go into that? What kind of stuff you guys look at? Because I know those are questions you guys get a lot.
Yeah.
They're questions we get a lot. And sometimes we don't even think about it because we're so jaded.
Yes.
But I'm sure the person listening wants to know, hey, if I'm getting an inspection, what exactly am I paying for? What kind of stuff are you guys doing?
Yeah. And every state is different too. We have different issues here that buyers are concerned about. So we're doing the exterior inspection. We're looking for the structure and the foundation, the roof, the walls, everything on the exterior, windows, doors, and then, of course, on the interior is the same. And then any component that's in the home, we're inspecting, plumbing, electric, and, if there's appliances and things in there, we're going to test those as well. So anything that we can possibly test or look at, we're going to. Some of the exclusions would be, we can't see behind the walls. And we can't see the plumbing behind the walls and
right.
Electric. And so we do the best we can to see behind the walls with things like moisture meters and infrared cameras and, all the handy gadgets that we have nowadays that, we didn't have several years ago. But yeah, it's the basically the foundation, everything that's on the exterior of the home and the interior, including everything that's in the attic, because sometimes people don't like to go in the attic, and that's why we go there.
Well, that's what I always tell people, as an agent. I've been through many, many home inspections, and sometimes we avoid houses, and don't make an offer on them based on things that I'm seeing if it's going to be a really high dollar item. And I know a first-time home buyer that really can't afford that expense. I'm not going to drag them through the mud of an offer to a contract and then the expense of an inspection only to find out stuff that I really should have seen to begin with. So we try to avoid a lot of those things, but we're certainly not climbing on the roof or in the attic. I can promise you that.
Yes. Yeah. And that's a great point, because a lot of times on the exterior, it could look pretty rough, but they could be just cosmetic things. Whereas a house can look really great from the exterior and have a lot of expensive repairs, because you couldn't see those. Maybe it's the electric or the plumbing or the roof.
We see that a lot in the rainy season.
Yes, which you're probably very good at viewing from the exterior.
Yeah, you kind of get a feel for, when the shingles start to curl and that kind of stuff. But, again, the one thing I'm not doing is walking the roof. So if you got an inspector on the roof, he's going to notice soft spots when he's walking.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
So let's talk about what an inspection is, because I think a lot of people think, it's mandatory, or a lot of times I've noticed that it seems like buyers mix up the appraisal for the bank, which is really ordered by the bank for them to determine the home value, with the inspection. Sure. And if it's a government loan, like a VA, FHA, or even USDA, they're going to do what they call a visual inspection to make sure that it meets the minimum requirements for a government loan. But there's a huge difference between that inspection, that quick visual valuatory inspection, if you will, as opposed to the thorough home inspections, which are what you guys do. And there's actually different types of inspections.
Sure. Yeah. So we get asked quite a bit what the difference is. Are you going to tell me how much the house is worth, or are you going to tell me?
See, people mix it up.
Yes, they do. So a home inspection is basically to determine what issues the home might have, and also the strengths of a home, because you want to know the strong aspects of a home just as well as you want to know the problems. And then also any maintenance issues, because the maintenance issues maybe not aren't as important as, something that's leaking, but it is a concern going forward. And you need to know what it's going to take to maintain this property.
Are you specifically mentioning like deferred maintenance? Is that what you're speaking of? Like things that the homeowner should have repaired over a long period of time, but didn't, and now it's a bigger problem, or will eventually be a bigger problem? Is that what you're referring to?
It could be. Like, let's say that the paint is oxidizing and it really needs a good coat of paint. Well, that may not be your first concern, because your first concern may be a plumbing leak. But the second concern should be that, because if not, that will cause issues going forward. So these are things that, maybe the untrained eye wouldn't see with purchasing the home without a home inspection. And it can save them a lot of money, because if they, get the house painted now, it could save them from a lot of costly repairs later. So basically, when you're purchasing a home, you know the purchase price, but you don't know the cost of the repairs if you don't have an inspection.
Right.
So if you have an inspection, now you know the cost of the repairs or what issues or repairs you will need going forward. So then you can determine the real price of the house.
And that's what we tell people all the time. In this market, we're seeing a lot of as-is with right to inspect contracts. And it's pretty normal. Like, even if it's a cash offer, they're usually going to have at least an inspection contingency. And so what that means is basically that's the buyer's chance to say, hey, I love it. It looks good on the surface. Let's buy it. I agree on this price. But your inspection's kind of like your due diligence, like you're doing your homework. You're going to have somebody check everything out to make sure it's in order, so that, if you're buying a home for $200,000, you still feel like it's worth $200,000, and you're going to find stuff. I mean, inspectors find stuff in every home, even in brand new homes. It's not a matter of finding stuff. It's a matter of what are those things and how costly are those things going to be to repair.
Absolutely. Yeah, because, whether it's a first-time home buyer or an investor or somebody that's just purchasing their second or third home, everybody wants to know what the real cost is going to be and what the maintenance issues will, or not issues, but just the ongoing maintenance will be, so they can make sure that they can afford that home, number one, or that they can make a profit from it if they are turning it into an investment. So, yeah, it's really important to know what you're getting into.
Absolutely. I know when we come back in just a couple of minutes, we're going to talk about a couple of things, like with regards to a checklist that we're going to offer you. And it's things that you should know and notice, or your agent should be noticing before you ever make an offer on a home. Not that it takes the place of an inspection, but it's certainly going to help you save the money so that you're saving the inspection for a good house. So you're listening to Katrina Madewell with Tampa Home Talk. We'll be back in just a minute. Welcome back. This is your host, Katrina Madewell, and you're listening to Tampa Home Talk here on 1340, 1350, and 1400. You'll find us here every Thursday and Saturday at 5 p.m. and across the web at Tampa Home Talk. In studio today, we have Melissa Rodgers and Dan with SEC Inspections. I'm going to mess up his last name. I'm just going to skip it. We'll just call him Dan the Man. So thank you so much for chiming in today. We're talking about some of the things that you will find on an inspection, why home inspections are necessary, what is an inspection and how it's different from an appraisal, and why it's a really good idea to get one. So I know you said one of the commonly asked questions you guys get is, what's covered in the inspection? I thought that was a good question.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's covered? We're looking for things like your electric, your plumbing, your roof, your heating and air. And then the biggest thing in Florida that people want to know is the structure. We have a lot of settlement in Florida. So people are looking for, they hear that word sinkhole. And so they see cracks and they think immediately this is a sinkhole home. And it's not necessarily the case. There's normal settlement. So the biggest thing that we have questions on is the structure of the home. Is this a good structure? The second costly thing.
We have to explain to people all the time about how we have the soft, sandy soil here in Florida. And pretty much every home that's been here forever is going to have some type of crack, even if it's a hairline crack, because it's normal with our type of soil.
Yeah, we live on a big sandbar.
It's the big stuff you're looking for, the stuff that you can stick a quarter in, right?
Yes.
That's the stuff you need to have the sinkhole engineers come out and have a look at.
Or even like your finger, like the width of
definitely your finger.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. So, and then, the next costly thing that people are really concerned about is the roof, because the roofing is expensive here because it's got to really withstand not just the weathering that we have, but also the wind and
the heat, the wind, the rain.
Yes. So, and also most of the new material is also impact rated. So if there's flying debris, it has to be impact rated. So that's why it is more expensive here. So roofing is another big part of the inspection. And then the other more costly things in the inspection that we're really looking at are the electric system. Really anything over 30 years old is what people are mostly concerned about. And then
like if you walk in and it's knob and tube.
Yes.
I don't think there's an insurance company on the plane that would write that at this point.
Yeah. And also fuses,
yes.
Fuses, people still argue that fuses are great. And, but the fact of it is that just the age of them alone, are concerning. So,
right.
And, plumbing, there's been all different types of plumbing over the years, galvanized and copper, PVC, polybutylene, and so they keep trying to find the latest and greatest plumbing, and then it's been known to have issues. So there's just different things that we're looking for in that area as well. And then it's kind of coincidental that those are the four main things: the electric, plumbing, roof, and heating and air, is that the insurance companies are concerned about as well. And that's why they require the 4-point.
Which is interesting. That's an interesting topic because there's more than one inspection. I think people think home inspection, I'm getting one inspection, but really there's like 4 different types of inspections.
Sure.
So do you want to dive into those? Like you have your main inspection where you're looking for pretty much everything in the home for the buyer.
Yes.
But then the other inspections are required by insurance and then sometimes our lender.
Sure.
So we'll talk about the 4-point, the wind mitigation, and the termite, which are usually the 4 different inspections you'll see.
Yeah, and they can all be done at the same time, or they can be done separately if they're not all needed at the same time. So, the general home inspection is usually a couple of hour inspection where you're detailing the entire house, and that's really just for the buyer's knowledge. It's there might be a lender that requires it or somebody else that wants to see it, but it's really basically for the buyer to know what they're purchasing. The 4-point inspection is really just for insurance purposes, and it may be at the same time of purchasing a home, because you're also purchasing insurance. And in order to get insurance, homes over 30 years old, in most cases, need a 4-point. And
we're seeing a lot of times they require it or they won't even insure it.
Yeah, some insurance companies even want 4-point inspections earlier, like 15 years or 20 years. But what a 4-point inspection is just for the insurance company to know what condition are these 4 main things in and what's the life expectancy. So we're looking for, again, plumbing, electric, roof, heating, and air. And they also want to know the condition. So if everything's in great condition, even if it's older, they're fine with that. But if everything's older and it's not in the greatest condition, they're going to require some updates be made before they will insure that home, which then means if you can't get insurance, then you can't purchase the home. So
indeed,
sometimes there's some negotiation that needs to happen at that point.
Right. And I think a lot of times, too, I've gotten, well, if you're looking at 4 points and the roof is one of those, and why do you still need a wind mitigation inspection, which is yet again a different type of inspection?
Yeah. And a wind mitigation inspection can be done at any time. If it's done at the time of the purchase of the home, it can reduce the insurance costs before you even purchase it.
That's a great point.
Or if you haven't had it done and you've already purchased your home, you can get a wind mitigation later at any time. And what that details is how the structure was built and anything that's been done to update it. Like if you had a new roof put on, you want to get a new wind mitigation because that details that you have a new roof and now your home is even stronger to withstand high winds, such, in hurricanes. So there's discounts that you get by having different features in your home. Like if your home was built after, in the 80s or later and you have hurricane clips or straps, those are discounts that you can get And then again, the roof, how the roof is shaped, and if you've added any opening protection to your windows and doors, like hurricane shutters. So those are all things that the insurance company will give you a discount on because your home might be stronger than somebody else's.
That's a great point, too, for anybody listening to Tampa Home Talk right now. If you already own your home, but you're just chiming in and you've recently had a new roof, or maybe you've gotten a roof since you purchased your home or got your initial insurance policy in place, it's a really good idea to reach out to us, and we'll connect you with SEC to get one of those wind mitigation inspections, and maybe even a 4-point if you've replaced some other stuff. That way, save you some money on your homeowners.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's interesting too, and I hear buyers ask this as well. So it's interesting because they say, well, are you going to see everything? Is there anything I'm going to find later? Like, is this going to cover absolutely everything? And the truth of the matter is, there's some stuff you can't see.
Yeah, and another good point about that is, if the home is fully furnished and it's for sale, and the buyer or the seller is still living in the house.
Excellent
There's
point.
all kinds of things that could be in the way. There could be paintings, there could be furniture, and we are not able to move those items to see behind them. Now, if sometimes we can sense that there might be something going on behind that wall because we could see on the other side of the wall. At that point, we could recommend that it be moved so we can properly inspect it. But other than that, we can't always see those things. Even sometimes floor coverings, carpetry or area rugs, sometimes those things can be disguising things.
Right. Absolutely.
Either purposely or not purposely.
That's true. I mean, you could have wood floors, in some of these 1920 bungalows that have a big area rug. And if it's covering the floor, it's a very good point that if it's a property that is furnished or occupied, for lack of better words, and the seller's there with their belongings, there's a lot of things that might be covering just plugs or different things the home inspector can't get to. They can't access because they're not allowed to touch the seller's property.
And sometimes it's small things like, after somebody moves in, they realize that the outlet somewhere isn't working. And it was because there was a dresser or something up against it. And it's not a huge expense to get that fixed, but we do get questions about that, like how come you weren't able to test that? We do test every outlet that is accessible, but it's just something like that we can't get to, that you can't test or you can't visualize.
And that's an excellent point too, because if someone were to say, "Oh, this house looks good. I'm not gonna do a home inspection. I think I'm good." But one of the things, like, you guys are going to test all the outlets, which is something that I'm not going to do. The buyer's usually not going to do. So at that point, let's say if none of the outlets in the home were working, that might be a sign of something major.
Yeah, or even a couple of them, maybe they're all working. But we have special tools that we can test to see, even if it's working, it may not be wired properly, which could cause a problem later.
For the reverse polarity?
Yes.
So talk about why that would matter and why a buyer should be concerned with that.
Well, you could be shocked, number one, or it could short out one of if you plug in an appliance to the, and it's an expensive appliance, it could, break your appliance. It could shock you, or it could just cause a fire, and it depends on where it's at or what's going on. But there's several issues with electric like that we're looking for.
And those are usually pretty simple things to fix.
Yes.
But again, it's a small thing that can be a very big thing if it's not corrected.
Yeah. Usually just a service call to an electrician, whatever a normal service call would be, they can fix that in 2 minutes flat and be on their way.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of them changing the wires, right, from one side to the other. It sounds simple. Obviously, you'd want an electrician to do that, but it really is that simple. It's just a matter of getting the qualified professional out there to do it. So, and a lot of times, I know we get this question. I know you guys get it, but a client will ask, or a buyer will ask, do I have to be there for the inspection?
That is, we let everyone else make that decision. If they want to be there, we're more than happy to have them there. It also depends if the seller is going to be there or the seller's agent. We let you realtors, professionals know or pick if you want people there or not. So the buyer, we always recommend that if they're not there, that they at least meet us at the end, or that we call them at the time of the inspection and kind of go over what our findings are. because they want to know about the home. But
Yes.
let's say they live out of state and they cannot be at the inspection.
Which we've had.
Yeah. So we always recommend that they're there at least for a portion of it. But if they can't be there, or if it's just not advised because of the situation.
Well, like you say, those inspections is going to be at least 2 hours. And sometimes people don't have 2 hours to take out of their workday, understandably so, which is why we're here, because we field a lot of those legwork type things. You know, my team and I do. But we basically will show there, we'll be there during the inspection. And then we recommend that the client at least come for the tail end, or like you say, contact the inspector at the end. And oftentimes, if we've had those out-of-town clients, we'll say, hey, can we go ahead and video your findings at the end of the walkthrough, just to push it on over to the client. I know you're still going to send the report. And a lot of times I think they still call you guys with questions, and they should.
Yeah, and that's what's important is that that they do have questions. So we want to make sure that their questions are answered. And sometimes in a report, even if they're detailed with photos, documenting, the buyer may still not know, what area of the house that was, or how important it is, or there's things that you can't always tell by reading it, but when you see it in person, it makes more sense. So, and
sometimes that when you get these reports, they're so long, there's so much information that goes into those, and you think, oh my gosh, this house looks awful. So the home inspection, I always forewarn people and my clients, the inspections always look worse than it is, because it's you guys' job to document everything you see, even if it's something as small as the reverse polarity that we talked about, which is where the hot and the cold or whatever is flipped around the electrical.
Yeah, and even if you've never owned a home before, if you've ever rented a home or an apartment, or walk around the house that you currently live in or apartment and start writing down the things that you find, and you'd be surprised what you find in the home you're already living in. So, a different home is going to be the same thing. There's always maintenance and repairs and, in every home. But usually the most important things that need to be addressed before purchasing the home are usually in the summary of the report. So don't necessarily take all the pages and be concerned with everything that's on it. But what's in the summary are the things that you really want to take notice of and kind of create an action plan on, how you're going to fix it or when.
Now, would those usually be your hazardous type stuff, or like things that are a fire hazard or a major expense or something that's at the end of its life?
Yes, it's going to be something that's actively leaking or not functioning at all, or a concern, if it's electric. So it's your more important things to take a notice of right away. And then the other things are going to be just, when you get around to it type of thing.
Gotcha. But like you said, it's a great analogy to just create an action plan, because I think any house you find, even if it's brand new, there's stuff that you're going to want to do that aren't there because the builder didn't put it in, whether it's landscaping or whatever. There's going to be something that the house needs. So create that action plan so that you can figure out where you should start.
Yeah.
And sometimes, especially if those items are big enough, we're going to do what we can to push those items over to the seller and their agent, because sometimes there are things really they should be fixing. Like if it would keep the house from being insurable, or if it would keep someone from getting a loan. Like if it's something that an FHA, appraiser would flag at the time of the inspection, then certainly those are things we'd want to have addressed in advance.
Yeah, and even if it's bank owned, you'd be surprised what once the bank knows the condition of the home, they're willing to negotiate or fix things as well. So it's just documentation of what's really going on with the house at that time.
You're listening to Tampa Home Talk, and we're going to take a quick break right now, but we'll be back in just a minute. We're going to go over some of the most common things that we see pretty much in almost nearly every inspection, or I should say 8 out of 10. We'll be back in just a minute. Welcome back. You're listening to Tampa Home Talk, And this is your host, Katrina Madewell, with Charles Rodenberg Realty on the Real Estate Radio Network here on Tan Talk 1340, 1350, and 1400. We'll be here every Thursday and Saturday at 5 p.m. You can catch us also online and across the web at tampahometalk.com. And don't forget to catch any of our past shows available via a podcast on our website at Tampa Home Talk. In studio today, we have Melissa Rodgers with SEC Inspections. Thank you so much for joining me again today. We've had some excellent stuff in the show, some of the commonly asked questions that you guys get. And it's interesting because we were talking during the break, and there's a lot of things that myself as an agent, just doing this for so long, we have to see on 8 out of 10 inspections. On so many inspections, we probably see this on many houses. And sometimes it can freak a buyer out and they're like, what, really? Wood rot? But so for example, some of the things, and we'll chime in and go back and forth on what you can think of as well. But that we were talking about at the bottom of the garage door, especially because here in Florida, many of the homes don't have gutters. Like they just, even the builders, they don't build them with the gutters and the downspouts. It's always extra money that you have to put on. But gutters are an excellent idea here in Florida because of all the rain that we get. And we get these heavy rains in the afternoon, especially in the summer. And what happens is when it rolls off the roof, there's usually a little concrete pad that sits outside the garage door and even the front of the garage, a lot of times towards the bottom on the right side on each. And where that water splatters, it hits the wood in the frame that's around those doors, or even back doors a lot of times around the pool, that kind of stuff. And we'll see that it gets really soft down there. And that wood literally has to be, if it's bad enough, cut out and replaced, and then, you sand it and you repaint it and seal it.
Yeah, that is definitely a big issue. And
it's, again, one of those things that, if you don't take care of it, you can get a certain type of termite, right? Is it the wood decay fungi that like those wet areas?
Yes. Yeah.
It's a pretty simple fix. A contractor could go in there and do that pretty inexpensively. Yeah,
and sealing it back off is key as well.
Yes. Definitely a good moisture-resistant paint. The other thing that I know we see a lot, too, talking about the same thing with regard to the gutters and the downspouts, if it's pulling off the roof, a lot of times the rain will actually make kind of like a trench or a little tunnel along the house. And then same thing there. It actually splatters the dirt and everything back up onto the house, which can wear the life of the paint, create water intrusion. There's a lot of things associated with that, right? I mean, general contractor background, that.
Yeah, it can really affect the foundation of the home, too.
Absolutely.
It can create not just a little puddling effect, but it can really, if it's not taken care of and it's not, the water's not going off of the house, then it's going toward the house, and it's really just sitting there underneath that foundation. So
we've seen some that actually are washed away so bad that you can see the slab.
Yeah.
You can see the dirt, hollowed out underneath the slab, which is a pretty simple thing to fix, but it's all a result of not having gutters. The other thing, too, we see a lot of times that get called out in home inspections. They're pretty simple things. We see it on almost every inspection, unless it's a brand new home, is the foliage being trimmed away from the house. So palm trees touching the house, other trees touching the house. We tell the clients, even when we're showing the property, before you guys get there, you don't want any of this landscape touching the house because it invites water intrusion. It invites a lot of things. I mean, it's interesting because I meet so many people in this industry, and I learn so many things every day just from different people that I talk to. And I remember I met this roofer once at this house because the vent stack for the plumbing on top of the roof was chewed, and I was like, we see that all the time, and I don't get why we see that all the time on these inspections. And he goes, well, you see that palm tree right there? The squirrels jump from tree to tree, and they get on the roof and they get up there and they sharpen their teeth on those lead boots to sharpen them so that they can eat nuts better. I'm like, really? We see this all the time. But it's a simple fix, right?
Yeah. I think there's a certain kind of squirrel that likes lead, too. They eat it.
Oh, really? See?
I don't know if they really eat it or if they just sharpen their teeth. But, yeah,
That's what the roofer said. He said they literally sharpen their teeth on it so they can eat the nuts. And I'm like, that's interesting. Yeah. So again, it's just a matter of trimming all that foliage and stuff away from the house, even hedges. Like you don't want them touching we see this a lot of times in the front of the house. People have hedges and they're just way too close to the house. They should be trimmed back. Is there a recommendation on that? Like 2-3 inches?
Yeah, at least I would say. If you can keep things at least 6 inches away, that's
even
ideal.
better. Yeah,
because then you've got also the pest issues and rodents, and really anything touching the house is just
and mold too. We've seen plants actually touching against the house, and it with the moisture and everything, it just kind of holds it there, and the sun can't dry it out because the plant's there. And then it forms mold like all over the windowsill.
Yeah, especially if it's on the side of the house where, it doesn't get a lot of sun. Yeah.
What are some of the other things that you guys see on a lot of the inspections?
One of the things is just the actual paint on the house. It's not an expense that people like to have to spend, and it's usually not a major concern, because if your roof is leaking, you're going to know, okay, I need to fix my roof or replace it. But the paint, a lot of people just really don't know. So if you can wipe your hand along the side of your house and you get anything white or coloring on your...
Like a chalky,
yeah. It's time to paint. And what happens is water can be getting into your home again, and it can cause other problems. So keeping the paint or any kind of coating on the outside of your house is really important here in Florida.
I think I heard an inspector say one time that water is not your house's friend. And that's like the best way to sum it up that I've ever heard. So if there's any type of water getting into your house by any means, whether it's by plants or anything, it's not a good thing, because it can, like you say, create much, much bigger problems.
Yeah, and you're going to have a certain amount of moisture in the air here. We live in a very moist climate, but when it gets to be over certain levels, and it depends on what part of the home you're in, if you're in the bathroom, it's going to be a different level than a bedroom or a kitchen. So if you can keep moisture out of the home altogether, more than just the normal moisture, that's ideal. That's
another great thing too that you guys check for, is that you guys come out with a moisture meter, so you can tell if that's something that you wouldn't be able to tell with the eye. Unless it just rained, you could physically see water on it, but you wouldn't be able to tell if an area is more moist or wetter than it should be without that moisture meter.
Yeah, if there's a stain, then of course, we're going to go there first and test and see, is it a dry stain? Because it could have been an old leak that just was never painted over. The leak might have been repaired, but the painting wasn't done. Or sometimes there is no staining, like you said, and we're still looking for areas of extra moisture. And we've found areas before where you couldn't even tell there was a stain, and it was way above the level. And then that's what usually indicates that there's some kind of a leak behind that wall for whatever reason.
And so what's the protocol for that? Do you guys actually do any type of a mold test on that, or?
We can. We usually refer things out to mold specialists, even though we are mold remediators certified and also mold assessors. It's not something that we specialize in. And we can test for it and we can look for it, but there's testing that you want to do that send out to a lab. But it could just be that there's a leak behind the wall. If it's anything more than that, you don't really need to go. If that's all it is, you really don't need to go to the expense of sending it out to a lab, because that's when it gets pretty costly.
Right.
That's usually your abnormal things. If you can tell it's been there for a long time and there's evidence of moisture and mold or mildew, then you might want to send it out. But otherwise, it's probably just a minor leak.
Yeah, and those are one of the things that are important. A lot of times are minor things that can be corrected early on, and then, it's settled. It's an easy thing to fix.
Absolutely.
Another one that I know we see a lot is the little empty places in the breaker boxes, or the holes in the breaker boxes.
Yes.
What's the formal word for that? It's a little, what is it, a plug, or what do they call those?
Well, it's a spot for a breaker, and if there's no breaker in there, then there's different holes in the breaker box that you can call knockouts or
knockouts. Yes.
But if there's a spot that maybe a breaker used to be there, or maybe there was never a breaker there, but if you don't have a breaker in that spot, there should be a cover plate for it. So you can't. It's not open. It's not open to either, shocking yourself. Or things getting in there. sometimes we see little lizards in there that.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
They're usually not alive.
It would make sense. There's a lot of those things. They're all over the place. Mm-hmm. So those are little things that I know I see a lot. I'm trying to think what else. Is there anything else that you see?
It just depends on the age of the home, but, common things are going to be plumbing and electrical, just maintenance issues. Like it's either starting to leak or it has leaked, which then caused some, damage underneath the sink, or the electric. A lot of the homes here in Florida are older and the electric has not been updated. And maybe the seller has never had an issue. So they think,
I'm good.
What's not broke, don't fix it if it's not broke. But it might not be broke. It might just be aging.
Right.
So there's things that, once they get to be 30 years old, like the plumbing and the electric, you really want to consider updating it, even if it hasn't had a problem in the past.
Some things I know that I've seen, too, with regard to the pools, how they have the little drains, especially before they have the new modern ones that they have now. A lot of times they used to put like a river rock type thing in there to tunnel the water out. And some of the things I've noticed is if those get clogged or they're empty, it creates it can create cracking on the decking.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And sometimes that will freak people out, too, and they see cracks and they think sinkhole.
Yeah, and again, sometimes it's just normal settlement that's going on. It might not even be related to the water being able to escape or not. It's just normal, there's concrete underneath those decks, and if the concrete starts, or the ground underneath the concrete starts to shift, it's just natural that's why we get cracks in our sidewalks, The
other thing I see, too, on the sliders a lot of times, many, many times they're dirty and the rollers need to be replaced. Yeah. And I think those are about a $40 part. My husband bought them and did them in our house. But we'll see that the slider's so heavy and you just can't move it. And they think, oh, my gosh, I got to replace these sliding glass doors. But the truth of the matter is, really, they just need to probably clean the tracks and replace the rollers, and it'll slide like it's brand new.
Yeah, I was going to say, sometimes the rollers can even be just cleaned and not replaced. So,
that makes sense.
Yeah, and you can even replace locks on those sliders. There's all kinds of repairs that you can do to those without totally removing them and replacing them.
Absolutely.
They can be costly.
So what about, do people ever ask you about fireplaces and the inspection on those? Like if you guys inspect those, or that's something that's normally outsourced, isn't it? Because it's a pretty specialized thing.
Yeah, you don't hear about chimney sweeps in Florida too often. We don't have a lot of fireplaces, but there are a lot of older homes or even newer homes that want them. So we're basically looking for the structure of it, and if it's an older one, if it's still stable. And that's, we can tell by seeing the exterior and also looking into it on the interior. But as far as the maintenance part of it, we're not going to test the maintenance part of it. So that's when you want to get a chimney sweep to come in and make sure it's totally cleaned out before you ever try to use it. Because if it's not cleaned out and it's not going to vent properly, you could have a smoke-filled house or a fire.
Absolutely.
So, we're just looking at the general structure of it, not any of the functionality of it.
So you're listening to Tampa Home Talk. Melissa Rodgers here in studio with us today with SEC. We are going to wrap up out of time soon, but I want to bring a couple points that I know that we talked about before we met on the show. But we were talking about the licensing requirements in the state of Florida, because a lot of people used to think that home inspectors were always licensed or whatever, and that wasn't the case. It's pretty recent.
Yeah, the state of Florida implemented home inspection license just 3 years ago. So prior to that, buyers or agents really didn't have a lot to go on other than there were certifications. There's ASHI, NACHI, FOBI, there's all kinds of national and local certifications that you can get to be an inspector, but there was no such thing as a state license. So 3 years ago, when they licensed home inspectors, you can imagine the influx of other types of professions, whether it be contractors or handyman or, anybody that had any kind of knowledge of a home went out and got their home inspection license.
Yes, that's interesting. I wonder how many people it actually kind of knocked off the map that really didn't have a construction background, that thought, oh, I'll get a tool belt and, go check a couple outlets and crawl the roof.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's been kind of scary over the last couple of years because agents and buyers and sellers have kind of been burned in that area. They thought that they were hiring a licensed person, but they really didn't know what they were getting as far as the experience or how long that person had been licensed. Because in other states, they've had home inspection licenses for many, many years. So Florida finally jumped on the bandwagon 3 years ago.
So what are some good questions that someone should ask their home inspector? Someone should ask their home inspector before they ever hire them.
You know, some of my favorite ones are, how many homes have you inspected? You know, so it's not just how long.
That's a great one.
Not how long you've been in the business, because you could have been in the business 20 years but only inspected 5 homes, you know.
You got a point. For sure.
You know, how many people have trusted you and how many people have you inspected for? And the other thing is, too, I always, no matter who I hire, I ask for a copy of their license and their insurance, and I make sure they're valid. Because you can say you're licensed and insured, but if you ask somebody to provide you proof, if they have a problem with that, there's probably a reason why. So if they say, sure, I'll give you a copy of my license and insurance, they're probably more credible than most.
That makes sense to me. You're listening to Tampa Home Talk. Thank you so much for chiming in with us today. Our show is going to be a wrap for the day, but we will be here every Thursday and Saturday at 5 p.m. If you miss any part of today's show, check us out on the web and on our podcast at Tampa Home Talk. Thanks a lot for joining us. We are out.